Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 149 of The Casual Author. It's pretty amazing how close I am to episode 150. So time just goes wicked fast. I was thinking the other day about how long I've been doing this, and it doesn't feel that long, but here we are, nearly episode 150. So today we're talking to Dana K. White about authenticity as a key to success. She talks about getting her business rolling from the beginning, how she always had her sights on making it a job for her writing as well as blogging career, where that's gone, the progression and collecting an audience. Collecting sounds negative, but finding her audience through authenticity and what that looks like for her. So it's a very amazing conversation, very helpful for those of us like myself who are looking for an audience and may or may not be struggling to find that specific audience. So yeah, I think you'll really enjoy that conversation with Dana. She's also really funny. We have a little moment in there where we laugh about, people's expectations about who we are, but also taking the time to figure out who we are and who we want to be for our business. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So as far as this podcast goes, I'm finally happy to say that the how to have the most stellar writing sessions guide is finally up and ready for you to access. So if you head to thecasualauthor.com and sign up for the email list, there's a button there that says sign up for the email list. You will get this free guide. Now, it's not a super long guide. All it is, there's about 7 or 8 tips or tricks that I've learned to have very stellar and productive writing sessions, whether that writing session be 20 minutes or an hour long. So, regardless of how much time I have, I can get into the mind space and write quite a bit in such a short amount of time because I get my mind into the mind space. So, obviously, it's free. It's available for you. Sign up for that. And yeah, the email list should be working now. It was brought to my attention last week. I mentioned this on my last podcast that it wasn't working at the time, but it is working now. And if something else goes wrong, just let me know. Obviously, you're the first people to tell me when something goes wrong. But yeah, the guy just goes into. I started writing about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I figured out what works for me to get into the writing session. Obviously, if it doesn't work for you, that's, it is what it is. But, a lot of people that I've talked to have heard these tips, have said, oh, that's genius. I've never thought about that, right? These little mini steps you can take to slide your mind into writing mode. It's amazing what difference that will have on your actual writing session. Writing session when you're in the zone versus when you're not. They're vastly different. I think we can all agree on that. But so, in connection with that, the Patreon, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So, I've talked before about on the podcast how I started a Patreon for the casual author. It's still in its infancy, I'll be honest with you there. But, for a couple dollars a month, you can support the show if you like it. And this is the new thing. I'm planning on being more active there. I don't have exact definitions of what that's going to look like, but I was reflecting on the fact that I've left Instagram and TikTok, at least for the time being. Who knows if I'll go back? I talk about it every time. But there's still this absence of community and this collective location where other authors, whether they're new or existing or people who just want to learn from each other, can work together to learn things. And so I think the Patreon is a good place for that as well. I plan on posting things that I'm learning week to week, possibly day to day, and talk a little bit more about my writing and author journey there. So yeah, you can join the community. It's just a couple dollars a month. If you're interested, you can always sign up and try it for a month. If you don't like it, unsign up. It is what it is. It's come and go type of thing. But yeah, I think the idea is just creating that space for community. I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing from like the fiction side of things, the author side of things, but we'll do that in just a bit. So yeah, sign up for the Patreon if you're interested. Once again, it's the patreon.com/the casual author. You'll see it there. And yeah, I'll be posting video updates and tips and tricks and other little things here and there. Hopefully it'll help you, especially if you're a new author, kind of wondering what you need to do to get started. So In terms of homestead updates, actually, before we get into the homestead updates, my mind's a little bit scattered today. Appreciate excuse me, appreciate everybody who has listened to the podcast over the last few weeks. But we got a couple comments. So H expressed her appreciation for the podcast episode last week and the conversation we had. I'm very grateful for her and all the insight that she had in, making another author connection. I think making connections is an important part of being an author. So thank you, H, for that comment. Spencer says, I think it's good to know what the rules are. He uses quotations on the rules, simply to be able to know how to effectively break them. A lot of the time, the unconventional is more fun to read. So I agree, Spencer. This is kind of on the episode where H and I talked about, learning the rules, the various ways to write, the prescriptive plotting ways to write, and how they didn't necessarily work for us. They just don't align with our brains and the process that we're following for writing. But there's nothing wrong with necessarily learning those rules, as long as if you recognize they don't work for you, you don't stick yourself in a box and say, I have to do it this way because that's what expert says, or that's what he or she or whoever says, and they're successful. You can kind of get a gut feeling for whether or not something's going to work for you. And yeah, recognizing and learning the rules as defined by them might aid you in breaking them, right? If that's what you decide to do. So thank you, Spencer, for the comment. Please comment and let me know where you're listening. Send pictures. If you're listening in fun places, I would love to see that. All right, in terms of a homestead update this week, really nothing more than the cold. It's just cold. We're riding out the last week or so of the bitter cold. There may be a day here or there scattered in, but overall it's going to increase in temperature next week. Why that's important, right? There's some extra things that I have to do when it's cold. For one, the kids can't come out and help me. I think I've talked about this before. I mean, they could, but for safety reasons, when it's -10, -15, they have enough to bundle up. But at the same time, even I get really cold fingertips and toes and things. It just, I don't know, they're still too young. I think when they're a little bit older, I'll make them go out. I say make in a nice way, right? Compel them to. And they'll willingly go out. They're actually kind of bummed that they don't get to go out. Every day they ask, is it warm enough? Is it warm enough? Can we go out? Because they love doing their animal chores. So we have to keep disappointing them and say no. So I got to take on all their chores and pretty much taking care of all the chickens and the goats and the cows and all the things, the feeding and the watering and the minerals and all the things that go into that. So I could go into more detail, which I might on my Patreon. I was considering, going more in depth into what some of these things look like, our learnings from a homestead perspective that I don't want to, consume too much of the podcast time for. But long story short, they just take more time. Chores just take more time. And it means if I don't get out earlier, then it means I get to work a little bit later and it all just kind of adds up. But we're having a little bit of trouble with water this year. Not for the cow, coincidentally. That's what we were most worried about, was watering the cow. But the chicken water, we have this, it's like this enclosed waterer that you can hang up, and it's got these little nipple things that they can peck at, and it'll let out droplets of water. And it plugs in. It's supposed to keep the water from freezing. The heating elements for those are apparently only insured for 1 year. And now we know why. We've had it for a year and a half and it's already broken. So go figure, right? We'll probably end up replacing it. I did have another waterer that's a more of a reservoir pool type thing where they can just peck into it and lift water out. It worked. So I'm using that and it's keeping it from freezing. But yeah, dealing with the frozen, we have these hydrants outside that don't freeze. They go deep into the ground, so I don't have to go inside for water, which I had to do a few years ago. Now I can just get it outside because those waterers will keep it from freezing. But yeah, it just gets so cold. The buckets that don't have the elements to stop it from freezing will just shatter, because even if the water freezes to break out the ice, it's just gonna break the bucket. So I get to carry lots of buckets in and out of the house. It's not super close. We're talking probably 750 feet or more from the house to where our animals are. So it's not too bad when you're trudging in the snow and cold, though, and carrying a full frozen 5-gallon bucket of water. It gets a little hefty. So I just call it my workout. And, don't complain. I get to listen to audiobooks. There's really nothing to complain about there. I love reasons to listen to podcasts and audiobooks. So I'll take it. But yeah, other than that, everything's doing great. The mastitis in Ginger is improving significantly with our herbal remedies. The swelling has gone down. Now we're just going to do another milk test to see what her cell count, the somatic cell count, looks like. and hopefully it's decreased. If not, then, we may have to do the antibiotics. I'm pretty confident it's gone down though, because the swelling has gone down at least 150%. It's not all the way gone, but it's pretty close. So we think within the next few days it should be all gone. Let's see, in terms of an author update. So stepping back to the social media thing, recognizing that without a community, it's really challenging to connect with readers. I started this Ream subscription thing about a year and a half ago. Didn't really put a whole lot into it. Now I'm recognizing the opportunity for, reaching other fiction lovers, people who love the books that I'm writing and who love just clean, adventurous fantasy and sci-fi, where, when I say clean, it's free of, swearing and sexual, explicit, anything on that front. It's going to be, they're not Christian based, but I'm Christian, so they're clean on that front. And I'm hoping to find more people to not necessarily join that. If they want to join it, great. But I'm using that as kind of my personal social media platform. So if you're listening and you just kind of want to see what's going on with what I'm writing, I may be posting just fun AI generated images. I don't use them for selling, just kind of like, hey, let's envision what this scene or what this world might look like with this AI generated art. It's kind of fun. I may post some of that up. I may just post like updates about what I'm writing, maybe some struggles that I'm experiencing. Yeah, the idea is I'm just going to post there probably 3 or 4 times a week. And if you are interested in joining, you can join for free. You can become a follower without having to pay anything. I plan on making all of these kind of public social media things available to everybody. And then if there's anything related to content, then I will put it behind kind of the subscription because it's related to the content that I'm posting. So yeah, if you want to join, I just head to reamstories.com/ I want to say it's author Dan Kenner. I'll put a link in the show notes to make sure I get it right. I guess I should have been more prepared. But yeah, once again, it's just kind of a way for me to reach you and to start another little bit of a community. And if you want free access, or not free access, early access to some of the things I'm working on, the Hidden Heritage series, as well as this adult fantasy series that I'm working on. Going forward, I do post early chapters. So yeah, it'll be up there, and I'm hoping to create this kind of community feeling within Ream and Patreon where possible. So I believe that's everything in terms of updates this week. So I'll go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with Dana. Hi, Dana. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing very, very well. Thanks for joining me today. Looking forward to diving into some of the topics, your books, and everything. Before we get started, though, how long have you been writing and publishing books?
I published my first traditionally published book came out in 20. Wait, what year is it?
I don't even know.
It was
2025.
2016. It was
Okay.
2016. Yeah, I remember. I mean, we're not going to go there, but it was election day in
Oh,
2016.
oh boy.
And I
It
was like,
was.
really? You're putting my book out on that day? And they did. So,
That's a really interesting choice because a lot of people won't even put books out during election year because of how, book sales just tend to tank and everything. So they chose election day
well, and
for.
it's funny because isn't it? I think election day is usually the first Tuesday in November. But that year, I guess because the first Tuesday was the first, it was actually the second. So I'm like,
Uh,
it just ended up. I remember when I realized that, I begged, please don't put it out on that day. I mean, really. And, you know,
they did it
that's the
anyway.
thing about publishers is, you know,
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a really mixed bag with publishing, with traditional publishing. I've heard a lot of
yeah,
very positive things and also very scary things about traditional publishing. So it's kind of
yeah,
you don't know what you're gonna get.
all of it.
But
Yeah.
so have you published continuously with the same publisher? Because I know you've published a number of books since then.
Yeah, I actually have. I pitched How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind in, I guess it was 2015. And I had an agent, and they came back with a two-book contract. So I was only
Okay.
pitching one, and they came back with a two. And it was kind of it was a interesting situation, you know. So it came out on election day, and then because it's decluttering content, they did like 3 rounds of uh, promotions. Okay. So they did like a holiday, get your house ready for the holiday promotion in November, December. They did a New Year, New You, which was January. And then they wanted to do a spring cleaning push as well in March, which is great. Right. But my second book was due. The second book that I had not pitched, so I didn't actually know what it was going to be about, right, was due June 2nd, I think, of 2017. So the book came
Hmm.
out in November, and I had another book due in June. And so that promoting at the same time as writing was really challenging. But I it almost killed me.
Hmm.
I mean, it was not a great experience. That first one. Although it's funny because the book that I ended up writing in 9 weeks is my biggest seller. Like it's been
That's
the career
crazy.
definer for me. Um, so yeah, that's Decluttering at the Speed of Life. It's done really, really well. And then I took some time off and I actually started writing this book in 2019. This is my first spiritually focused book.
Okay.
But I really wanted to write it on my own. I didn't want to pitch it first and then write it. And so um, I worked on it and then, I was done with the very first draft like March 1st of 2020 and thought that after spring break, I thought I would take 2 weeks off. And then after spring break, when my kids, went back to school after spring break, I would then, get it polished and then pitch it. This was because normally with nonfiction, you pitch it and then you write it. But
Right. Yep.
um, we all know what happened. My kids never went back to school, and so
Hmm.
that just kind of set it on this thing. And so it was about probably 2 years ago. I'd have to think about it, but 2 years ago that I finally decided I need to I need to get under contract, or I'm never going to actually get it finished. So, but in the midst of that, the same publisher that I had been with before came to me, their gift book division came to me and said, "Hey, would you write a gift book?" Which is basically, do you know what a gift book is?
I don't know that I've heard of it, so you have to
Yeah.
educate me on that.
So, so you have trade books. I don't know why they're called trade books, but they're the 60,000 word yada yada yada, all the words, right?
Hmm.
And then a gift book is more, it's usually about 35 to 40,000 words
Okay.
and it has pictures. So
Oh, okay.
it's I don't I'm like, are people really giving decluttering books to friends? I don't know. But it's just cuter and it's smaller and it's just I don't know, it's just has the pictures in it. So it's this whole other division. So they had come to me and they were like, "Hey, can you do a tips format of basically what is in the other books?" And so that was very easy to write. So I kind of wrote that in the middle of writing this book. And then when it came time to pitch, uh, I had to, they had right of first refusal um, because of my previous books. So, my agent said, we don't have to go with them, but, I really had kind of worked with them on something in the middle too, because of the gift book. And then also they had experimented with some audio products, which
Mm.
um, I like experimenting. I'm an online, I started out as a blogger, and so I enjoy that kind of stuff. So that kind of was a experience that I had with them after everybody had changed. Like it's all different people now than it was with my first books. So when it came around to it, I was like, you know what? I think I want to go again with this publisher. I really liked the people, and just to be honest, they were going to let me write the book I wanted to write. So, because I've proven myself as an author with them. Um, so yeah, it really probably came mostly down to this is the book I want to write, and it's very important to me to stick with that vision. And I know that sometimes what I do is not what people expect necessarily
Mm.
for people who talk about decluttering. And so the fact that they have the receipts to know that this my stuff does resonate with people, even though it's not necessarily the most like slick kind of talking about decluttering out there that people assume is going to be the anyway, you know what I mean. um or maybe you don't, but
No, I do.
but they
I'm
yeah,
nodding.
you know what I mean.
I,
I kind of get down to the down and dirty, and people are like, but don't you want to show the color coded things? And I'm like, that's not what I do. I don't
right.
talk about it from that perspective. I come from a different perspective, and they know that works. And so when I said this is the book I want to write, there was no pushback. Like they were like, okay, your audience. you can
Hmm.
do it. And so that was the biggest reason why I was like, yeah, I do want to go with them again, for
I
sure.
love that. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, this is amazing for me. I love talking to traditionally published authors because I have zero experience with it. I am by choice a self-published author.
Yeah.
There's lots of reasons for that. We can go into them if you're interested. If not, that's fine. But yeah, I just is one of those things where I love learning about traditional publishing because I know there's a lot of people who listen who are interested in that, the querying
Yeah.
process and the yeah. I actually only recently heard from another nonfiction author that generally nonfiction authors pitch first before they write it, and that just blows my mind, right? Because I'm always
Yeah.
a write first type of person,
Yeah.
being a discovery writer. I don't generally plot my things out, but in any case, I do want to ask you a little bit because it seems like you were a blogger for a period of time before you actually started writing. Is that correct? Well, you were writing the blog before you started writing
Right.
the book, so you were a
Right. So
writer,
that,
just not a book, a
yeah,
novel writer.
exactly. No, that's actually my story is that I wanted to write. I
Hmm.
wanted to be a writer. I was a mom of young kids, and I had been a theater arts teacher before I had kids, that I also really enjoyed the creative process of writing. And so once I had kids, I was like, maybe that's something I could do and also, be a mom and, not work at an office full time or whatever. And so I was like, that was my goal, was to figure out how to make writing a career.
Hmm.
And so, I'm 50, so I've been around a while, but back in
Just a
2008,
couple of years.
yeah, right. So back in 2008, which now is a really long time ago, uh, when I discovered blogs, I was like, well, there you go. Like,
Hmm.
because I didn't know how to go about being a writer, right? And so I was like, I saw people who were writing, other people were reading it. I saw people turning it into a business, and I was like, that's it. I've got to do that. But I didn't start my blog for a year and a half because my house was a disaster. So
Mm.
this was not what I was going to be writing about in my plans. This was God's plan, So I wanted to get my house under control. It had always been a struggle, like a huge struggle my entire life. And so once it was actually right before my son, who's now 21, went to kindergarten, and I was just going to have one kid at home. And I was like, okay, God, this is the time. Like, it makes sense that I have one kid. She'll go down for a nap. I could write. Like, I should have a blog now. This is the thing that I really felt like God was calling me to do. And I couldn't do it because he had not answered my prayer to make me organized the way that I had begged him to make me organized. And so um, God was just like, well, write about that. And I was like, okay, that's actually a really good idea, God. Okay. All right. So I will get to learn about blogging, stay focused on my house. It'll take me, what, 3 or 4 months, maybe? My house will be perfect. And then I can actually write about the things that I felt qualified and excited to write about. And here we are, and it's 2025, and it's been, we're going on 16 years now of this being the thing that actually God wanted me to write all along. Like, this was his plan. And he had to put that desire in my heart to write, that made me desperate enough that I would write about this. Now, to be clear, in the beginning, it was anonymous. I made up a fake name. I
Oh,
set up a
interesting.
new
Okay.
email address. I did not tell anyone I knew. There's still people in my life who don't know what I do, right? Like, I didn't tell anybody because this was my shameful secret, right? And because
Hmm.
it was anonymous, I uh, was just like putting it all out there. I was like trying to figure out, like, why, what am I doing? What am I not doing? What are my reasons why I resist doing this thing or whatever? I do this instead of this. And so but because I was so honest, as people started to read it, I assumed people would be horrified. Like, that's why I didn't want anybody to know it was me, right? Um but instead people were like, these are my thoughts. I thought I was the only one, who struggled like this. And so
Hmm.
then this is, it was about 2.5 years before I was willing to teach anybody anything, because it just didn't make any sense for somebody to learn about this from me, because this is my big struggle. But God really worked in me being willing to do that and showing me, no, 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 I made you the way that you are. I created your brain to work the way it works. And this is what I have for you to do. And so being willing to give that over, for not just give it over to him, but give it over to him for him to use it.
Hmm.
Like, to use this shameful secret it was a big deal. So yeah, that's how I got started writing. And then it was about, I think my first book came out about 7 years after I had started the blog.
Wow.
So, but the goal was always to write, and it was just like that was an easy entry way to start writing. And through blogging, I really, developed and found my voice. I mean, I'd always enjoyed writing, but through the every day and the feedback that you got, it's not like that anymore. But but you got feedback every day. Like you saw what things people responded to and what things caused crickets. I mean, like it just was it was a really fun time. And it also, like, I always knew I was funny, right? But and my husband thinks I'm hilarious. He's equally funny, but I mean, like, there was something that happened when you start like having random strangers tell you that you're hilarious. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's my core value in life. Like, you tell me I'm funny, we're going to be friends forever. Like, and so the confidence that came from that, like, to, oh, okay, I'm not just funny to me and a couple of my friends. No, I'm legit. I mean, I know here I'm saying this and people are gonna be like, she's not funny. She hasn't said
She
a
hasn't
funny
made
thing
me
yet.
laugh yet. Come on,
Yeah.
Dana. You're
Ah,
failing.
exactly. I promise I'm funny. No, but I mean, like, but it really changed things, So I don't think I would be the writer that I am if I didn't, like, I know what hits,
Hmm.
because of the blogging days. Like,
Hmm.
that got me to the point where I'm like, I know my people. I know what they respond to. I know what they need to hear. I know how to say it in a way that they're going to be able to respond and not be offended or take it personally, because, of that experience. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
I love that. I think that's amazing. Yeah, the whole blogging thing. I've thought about it before, but I think that the trickiest thing for me with blogging is it's like social media in a way, where there's like this understandable expectation for a certain kind of caliber and frequency of content. And I can't always guarantee that I can keep up with that frequency with my life. Like I know consistency is super important with that. But, I think blogging at the time, back 2008, 2009, was huge. I
Yeah.
remember that it was just like kind of before social media. It was still social media was there, but it wasn't as huge.
It
I think
wasn't the
that has
same.
kind of
Yeah.
taken over things like
Yeah.
TikTok and Instagram and whatnot, for better or for worse. I'm not going to comment on that, but
Yeah.
yeah, I still think the bloggers that are having a lot of success have found their audience and they've just kept them.
Yeah.
From those years, those people who are
Well, and
loyal
that
to blogs.
it's funny because, I don't know if this is going to sound right or not, but like the blogging community that I got involved in was very business focused,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to maybe some people who felt like maybe they shouldn't make money on their blog. Like, I
Oh
always went
yeah.
into it as, I mean, and I said it, I put ads on my site as soon as I could. I was like, listen, I want to be a writer, meaning I want this to be my job. So I never made any apology for this is, like, this is how this can be a job, right? Um, but I feel like in that, you sometimes have people who are like, no, I'm writing for the purity of it, and I don't want to, if I get paid, then that's, and I'm
Purity.
like, whatever, this is my job, right? Um, but because I went into it in the business thing, one of the things that I've seen and I'm thankful for, that I don't know that I knew that I was doing in the beginning, but it was always my goal to make real connections to where people were like, I want to read everything she writes. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Where there are some others who maybe figured out how to make more money than I did by Google traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and one time hits, you know what I mean? Things that would go viral on such and such. And I'm like, those are all great things. But a lot of them are struggling right now because they didn't necessarily connect directly with audience members.
Mm-hmm.
They were going on drive-by hits that earned them a lot of money, but now Google and everything, AI and all that kind of stuff, where I'm like, I grew a lot slower than a lot of them did, but it was all very personal connections with the people who were reading. And so it hasn't affected me in that same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important piece of any business, particularly a writing business in any genre or nonfiction or whatever, is not only connecting with your readers, but, make directly for one and just making sure that it's like a deep connection that's not just this fleeting, oh, that was a good book. And then you completely forget about the author, right?
Right.
You're creating this long-term relationship with these people, which, a lot of people say, you could make the same amount of money having a lot of people who aren't your fans read your stuff, or maybe 100 or 200 or 1,000 people who are your fans, right? And the outcomes are similar but different in a way. And it sounds like you kind of went for the latter, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. It
it's
was
working for
always
you.
my goal. Even when I would write about a recipe or I would write about something that had nothing, I would always try to put something in there about what I was trying to do with this site.
Hmm.
Like that, okay, so I'm planning my meals because I, get so caught up in blah blah blah, and just that kind of thing. I just always had the mentality, if somebody ends up here once, I need them to know what it is that I'm about.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is tricky if you don't know what you're about, right? And I know there's a lot of authors, like I said, people with various genres, traditional and indie, wherever you are, that maybe don't know what they are. Maybe they can't describe that. Maybe they haven't kind of set themselves, kind of created the authenticity or a face for themselves. You shouldn't have to create that, right? You just have to know what that is going into it so that people can hear you and read what you're writing and be like, oh, I know that this is who Dan is, or I know this
Yeah.
is who Dana is, and this is the story they're bringing. So I have a tricky
I love
question
that.
for you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm just, well, actually, maybe I'll let you go first before I switch gears with what
Yeah.
you
I
were
mean, what I
about to
was going to say, is, it's funny how I thought that having um, such a narrow subject matter would would like cause me to run out of things to say,
say. Mm-hmm.
but it's actually the opposite. Like, because I have a very specific, I write about home stuff and all that. It's like anything that happens in life that can have a parallel to that or can have a learning in that, I like have a reason to write about it. It actually tends, what I notice, it tends to be a lot more of a struggle for people who have broader
Mm-hmm.
subject matter, because then it almost feels like, okay, well, there's so many things I could write about, but which one am I choosing today, where I'm like, this is my subject matter, whatever comes up for this subject matter, I'm gonna write about it. And anyway, it in a strange way, and I don't know that I can explain exactly why, but I found that it actually helped me creatively to have a narrower focus. um
No,
so
I mean, I think it
I'm
does make
still amazed
sense.
that I keep talking about it. Like, I'm like, I'm still talking about this, what in the world, but somehow, you know
The well runneth not dry, right?
no, it
There,
does
there's
not.
there's plenty there. I think it's one of those things where, in terms of audience and just niching in general, I think there's always an advantage to that, right? Because it helps you know who you are, where you want to be. It also differentiates you from other people,
Right.
writers, individuals. But yeah, I think there's something to be said around in-depth research and understanding of something that you start to dig beneath the surface of the skin. And so that's when people start hearing what you're saying. They're like, oh, that's meaningful, right? That's deep because
Yeah.
you took the time and didn't get scattered across kind of a lot of different subjects. So I can see that it does make sense. It totally
Yeah.
makes sense to me
Yeah.
on how that works. So the tricky question for you, because someone who, I'm at the beginning phases of my business, only started not that long ago, writing 3 or 4 years ago. Um, how do you balance authenticity and privacy with your life, right? So obviously the internet is not necessarily the greatest place for certain things to be said. I'm not afraid to say things, but like I've got 7 kids, right? I've got a lot of things going on. We have a homestead, we've got animals that we manage. I'm an author, Christian, all these things. And I'm definitely open about those things, but where's the line between privacy for your protection and safety and authenticity to reach your audience?
That is such a great question. It's one of my favorite subjects, honestly. Um, so I am very open and honest about my home,
Okay.
right? Like that is, and again, it's my niche or my niche
Right.
or however you
Right.
like to say it, right?
Yep.
Like it's my thing, so that's what I'm talking about. But I don't share about my family necessarily. So like for me, for example, when I started, my kids were 3, 5, and 7. And
Hmm.
I was going from a place of my house being completely out of control, okay, and a constant frustration. I was always working on it, but I just couldn't figure it out, right?
Hmm.
And so so in the beginning, I would be working in my kids' rooms, right? And then they hit a point, and it was before puberty even, but they hit a point where I just went, these are their rooms,
Hmm.
and so I stopped sharing their spaces.
Yep.
And I would sometimes have people who are like, I want to see your kids' room. I want to see. And I'm like, you don't have the right to see my kids' room. You have
Hmm.
the right to see whatever I want you to see. Okay. And I'm being honest, and you're going to have to take it at what it is. But there are boundaries around that. Like, I don't share where I live, I don't share all these things. I didn't share for a really long time what my husband did for a living. Like I just because he's a public school administrator.
Oh,
And so
cool.
it was like I had been doing this for like 14 years before they knew what my husband did. Because I just was like, it's not your business.
Hmm.
But it
It's
also
none,
it
yeah.
puts those boundaries around it, right? And I also make all of my decisions based on my family.
Hmm.
So I was a stay-at-home mom. I did not turn this into, like, legitimately try to turn it into a business until my kids were in school. And I don't homeschool or anything, so they were off in school. And um and I did that on purpose. And the first summer, maybe 2 summers, I really struggled because I was like, I want, all the kids are at home and we have our summer routine. And yet I felt this obligation to write on my blog every day. And so I made a decision. I think it was about the third year. And I said, I am not going to work during the summer.
Mm.
And I cannot tell you how many people, mostly other people in this business, are like, how do you do that? And I still do it. And people are like, my kids are in college now, but spoiler alert, how old are your kids?
My oldest is 10. The youngest
Oh,
is six
well, let
months
me
old.
just tell you, if you are
Yeah.
under the delusion that it gets easier when they go to college,
Oh, no. No, I'm not
oh
expecting
my
it.
word. It's like I can't plan
No.
anything because they have these things called lives.
Yeah.
And like anyway, so it's crazy. It's bananas, right? So I'm like, it's almost more important now. I mean, it's always important. But I just said, I'm not going to do this in the summer. So, like, my podcast takes off in the summer. I don't have YouTube videos in the summer. And people are like, I have other YouTubers who will email me and say, how do you do this? And I'm like, because I've made the decision
Hmm.
that this is my priority. And I am a Christian, and I give this whole entire business and everything to God. And so I'm like, you know what? If it fails, it fails because I took the summer off.
Yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
it's like, how do you do this and not lose anything? I'm like, well, I can't guarantee I'm not going to lose anything over time. Now, in the beginning, it used to take probably, I would come back in mid-August. It would take till like mid-October to kind of get my numbers back up. Now, they're back up immediately. But
yeah.
people know and they expect it. And I can't tell you how many people will tell me, they'll send me emails, they'll leave comments, and they'll say, thank you for doing this. That is the example I actually need to see, is that you're like, anyway, what was the question? Because I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, the
I don't
privacy.
remember, but it was a great answer. Oh, no. It was
Yeah, no, but the privacy, I think that, and here's my advice for you. And you may not want to hear this, and do whatever you want to do, make
you
your
won't offend
decisions.
me. I don't get offended. It's all good.
Um, don't make your kids the focus of your
Oh,
content,
no. Heavens, no.
because
Yeah.
they grow, they go through gangly phases.
We all did.
I mean, I just, as cute as they are, there will be a day when they're not as cute. And
Well,
I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm like, you're putting them on there, and the real truth is that they have their own stories.
right.
Even if you're 6 week old or you're 6 month old or however, if they have their own stories. And the thing that, my mother, Hi, mom, if you're going to watch this anyway. My mom is an author, right?
Hmm.
And she has done, boutique publishing on several things. She's got a children's book, she's got some middle grade fiction, biblical fiction.
Cool.
And, uh, there's a book, her picture book that she has. She's always like, "Oh, that's you." And the question is like, the question that the little girls ask is like, "Who will I marry?" or whatever. And she's like, "Because I remember when you were so obsessed over who you were going to marry." Well, in my mind, I'm thinking, I went through a phase when I graduated from college and hadn't met anybody, right? And I really had to do a lot of soul searching
Hmm.
and work with God to say, I may not get married and I'm okay with that.
Mm.
Like that is much more how I define myself, right?
Sure.
Is that I'm married. I'm so thankful that I'm married. Like literally people who know us are like, y'all are the best matched people we've ever met. Like it's great. But part of the reason why I think it's great is because I came to that moment where I said, God, you can have it. I may not get married. Yes, I was obsessed with being married as a little girl, but that's not my story. And so sometimes when that story is told by your parent of their view of it, and oh, I would have put this bow on it, and I'm like, so it's a hard thing. And so I try to
Hmm.
take that and go with my kids. I'm like, it is not my job to tell their story. They've got their own stories. And so that's my biggest piece of
Hmm.
advice that I give. And that comes more from being a mom of, young adults than from writing.
Hmm.
I share the same thing with just, when they ask, when young moms ask for advice, I say be so careful what you put out there
Hmm.
about your kids. And it's not just because of, oh, somebody might do something with that. It's because you want to protect your relationship with them. And if, you know, and especially if you start monetizing their story, that's just a bad
Yeah.
road to go down.
Yep.
So anyway, sorry. You can cut all that out if you need to, but
I know. I think it's amazing. I just for context, I say nothing about my children. The only thing anybody
yeah,
knows is that I have seven of them. That's pretty much all I say.
right.
And occasionally I'll say from 10 to 6, whatever the range is at the time.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, other than that, like I intentionally don't, partially for safety reasons, but also for, like I said, I'm here to make my own way. I'm not here to use anybody else's story for my own gains. So, but
And
yeah, I
you
was just
will run
curious,
out of
right?
content. Like we're talking
Yeah.
about the running out of content. There is going to come a point where they
Hmm.
don't want you
Right.
sharing their story
Which
anymore.
they should.
And also,
Yeah.
I remember hearing somebody say, like, I wish parents of teenagers would be as open as parents of preschoolers. And I'm like, it's not possible.
No. Well, and it's not kind to be, right?
No,
Particularly to
no.
teenagers. Like if I was a teenager and YouTube was big, I'm a little older as well. YouTube wasn't really a thing when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But if my mom had slathered my life all over the internet, I probably would have been so mad, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot going on for me teenagers. Just for context, those of you listening, if you want to hear more about the story, I didn't weigh more than 100 pounds until I was 18 years old. So I was
Wow.
a tiny kid, was like 5'3", weighed 90. My first driver's license said 5'4" and 93 pounds. And I looked like a
Wow.
12-year-old. So it's a fun story if you want to get into that. But if my mom at the time had done that all over the internet, I would have been so mortified as a
Yeah.
teenager. So it's just
Yeah.
like, it's just not space for that. But anyway, yeah, the only reason I was asking is because I know that reaching your audience, while an important piece of business, can be some of the most difficult thing. One of the biggest things that's difficult because, particularly when you're a stay-at-home person, right? I work from home for my job, which I'm very grateful for. We have a homestead. We homeschool our kids, right? We are literally home all the time. And so digital means are kind of the easiest and best way to reach people, but that's not always the easiest, right? It's hard sometimes to be authentic over the camera, over digital means.
Mhm.
And so that was the point of the question, was just some advice for people who might be recluses, either by choice or by necessity, how they can reach and connect with an audience without giving up too much information.
Yeah. I
That's
think
the
there's just
privacy
such a
thing.
there's a definite difference between authenticity and, like, it's not the same thing as putting it all out there.
That's true. Secret
You know what I
telling
mean?
or whatever
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to
it's just
call it.
not. Like I I'm very authentic and, honest about my struggles and what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, all that kind of stuff, but it's like it's in a narrow area
Hmm.
where I just don't, it's funny because I don't know if it's funny, but like I specifically decided to not share our bathroom remodel
Hmm.
on
Okay.
YouTube. So I had talked about it, because I've done videos in the bath and we, moved into an older home and I'd done videos in there and, kind of some videos as I was prepping it to get ready for the remodel. And I had a lot of people who are like, "Oh, we can't wait to see the after." Well, then I have, I've got some haters. And so people who would say things and I just made a decision. I was like, I'm not going to show my bathroom. It's not that they don't see bits and pieces of it in future videos. That's fine, But as far as like a big remodel reveal, because I'm like, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not a decorating site. I am a decluttering place. Like this is what I do. I declutter. I'm not here to show you how to do that. And if I put that out there as a here's my bathroom that I just like repainted, did new tile, I didn't do some big fancy remodel, um, the haters will make me feel bad and will change how I feel about my bathroom.
That's
You know
fair.
what I mean?
Yeah. Huh.
And I'm like, I love my bathroom. I don't care, but if I put it out there, then I'm inviting them to, you should have used a different paint color or that's a bad, you're going to regret those tiles or, but that's just kind of stuff people do. And I'm not
Yeah,
just
that's
saying
true.
that if you say that, you're a hater, but I did have some,
She just called you out as haters, listeners. No,
I
I'm just
had
kidding.
some, I had some haters at the moment when I made that decision who were legitimate haters,
That's fair. That's
and
fair.
so they've all been banned at this point. But but yeah, it really was a decision. And I was talking to some YouTuber friends, and they were like, "You can do that?" I'm like, "Yeah,
You
I
can
can.
do
I
that.
can do whatever I want to do." I'm like,
That's funny.
nobody. I don't owe anybody pictures of my bathroom.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I share what I want to share.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Absolutely. Well, and I think that I'm just going to take that back. I want to do talk about decluttering for just a minute because the whole idea of it fascinates me. But we'll get to that in just a second.
okay.
Um, no, I agree with the whole price thing. I also agree with the kind of staying in your lane type of perspective. I mean, obviously, you can put whatever content you want on there, but I unintentionally killed my TikTok account. It
Oh
was,
no,
it was fine. I mean, whatever. I'm not a
it doesn't
huge
matter
social
anymore
media person.
anyway.
Yeah, right. In a few days.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of those things where I had an author TikTok, and it was probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. I had kind of, mentioned that we had a homestead, and I had showed her cow and goats every once in a while. It wasn't a very like common occurrence, but I showed this like kitten video where there was this lost kitten that was like attached to me, and it got like 15 million views or something wild on
Oh my God.
TikTok. And I say it killed my TikTok account. It did, right? Because I unintentionally gathered all of these cat lovers onto my account and I didn't post cat content. That was just not what I did. And so they were disappointed that I wasn't putting more on there. I was like, sorry, that's not what I'm about. So I had like 60,000 followers and like maybe 5,000 of them actually cared about books and
Yep.
fiction and fantasy. So I was like, well, that was my bad. And that's kind of when I stopped doing TikTok
But I mean, that's
because
exactly the truth. It's like that's the other side of going viral is
yep,
like you can go viral, but if you're going viral for anything other than what you're
yep,
actually there to do, it doesn't actually matter. And that's when
exactly.
the crazies come out, right? Is when you go
Oh,
viral.
absolutely. The fights that happened, it was wild. There was like
I can
thousands upon
imagine.
thousands of fights about cats. We don't have to get into the situation. Barn people have different opinions on barn cats, which we have barn cats, but
I
anyway,
completely,
we don't
yes,
have to get
yes,
into that.
understand that.
So let's
Yeah.
talk about decluttering just for a minute because, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't have a passion for decluttering. My wife does. I don't know that I have a problem with clutter, but I also don't have I'm not in a good space. I'm standing in this specific position on purpose because if I turn around, then you'll see the mess that's on my floor. So
Yeah.
I'll just be
I
honest with
mean,
that.
I just have to be clear. I'm not passionate about decluttering either.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, I don't talk about this because I'm like, oh my word, it's the most fun thing ever. I talk about it because it's how I got my house under control.
Fair
And
enough. Yeah.
so, my little shtick at the beginning of my podcast is, I talk about cleaning and organizing for people who don't love cleaning and organizing. Like this is, like it's yeah, exactly. So I'm like, that's what I do. That's
Hmm.
my unique niche there.
That's what you
Niche.
said.
Um,
You can pronounce however you like. I am probably pronouncing it wrong, but so let's talk about Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. It's coming out in February, just right around the corner. So you mentioned that this is kind of like a faith-centered, or at least faith-included message about clutter and mess and people's maybe shame or worry about those things in their homes and their lives, right?
Faith centered. It is not faith included. This is the Jesus
Fair
book.
enough.
This is
This
the
is a
one.
Jesus book. Okay.
It's got Jesus in the title on purpose because a lot of my audience does not follow um Christ, right? And
Hmm.
so and I'm thankful for that, right? Like I love my varied audience that I have of all kinds of people from everywhere and of all different backgrounds and everything. So um one of the, as I I mentioned that as I started my blog, I was starting it to get my house under control. And as a Christian woman, I thought I must be missing something because I think this is supposed to be easy for Christian women, right?
Supposed to be.
And also because things get said over the years and people think they're being helpful and instead they turn what is already a struggle into now a spiritual issue, right? And
Mm,
so
yeah.
I was waiting for as I worked on my house, I was waiting for God to reveal to me the truth that I had been missing that was going to make this all easy. And instead, what he revealed to me was I never cared about your messy house.
Hmm.
I always cared about your heart. And I want you to give me all of you, even this piece of you that you're like, why would God want that? Right. Instead, he wanted to take that and he wanted to use that. And that's what he's done here. Um, so my first three books, do not contain any spiritual content. And that was very much on purpose because of I'm not saying that authors who have brought in spiritual stuff with decluttering have intended for it. I don't think their intention was at all to, you know, cause spiritual confusion for anybody, but for the person who is like, I don't get it. Like,
Hmm.
I think I'm broken. I think my brain, there's something wrong
Yeah.
with me. I don't get this. And oh, and then now I'm also not being a good steward of what God has given me. And I'm like, but I'm trying, but I can't, but I'm
Hmm.
trying, but I can't. And so now all of a sudden it's like, what am I missing? I had a woman come to me one time after a speaking event who said, so I've been trying to figure out what fruit of the spirit I'm missing that this is
Oh
so
no.
hard for me to keep my house under control. And I was like, I mean, so just there's not one, by the way, just to be clear,
Oh,
right?
right.
Like
Oh,
that,
I yeah.
yeah, it's not, you're dishes being done is not a fruit of the spirit. So it's that. And so I um very much since God was making it clear to me this is not a spiritual issue, Dana, whatever. Everything's a spiritual issue, right? Like cuz I give everything to God. But it's not, right? It's not a
Hmm.
spiritual failure that I tend to end up with more clutter than most people do, right? Uh so I didn't include it in the first three and then I was like it's time. I initially was like, I want to write something about God's grace and blah, blah, blah. And then God was like, yeah, Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. Like, I didn't want it to be on this same topic, but God was like, this is the platform. These are the people
Hmm.
I have given you. Share me with them. So the goal is to remove the shame that that comes with this particular struggle, because it is a struggle that a lot of people feel a lot of shame and embarrassment about, um, and feel very misunderstood over. The misconception that a messy house is the result of laziness, um, and that is, I would say, most of the time not the case, right? Uh, so, I mean, I say right, but you may not know. But I mean, really though, like that's the assumption is that, oh, okay, well, the Proverbs 31 woman, her house was perfect, right? Because she wasn't lazy. Well, it never talks about her house in Proverbs
Hmm.
31. Like there's no mention of cleanliness, tidiness, organization, nothing like that, right? And the women that I know who struggle the most in their homes remind me so much of the Proverbs 31 women. They are highly productive, driven, people who are constantly, doing more and exciting things and making their own fabrics and blah blah. I mean, like this is the type of person who often struggles in their home. Not that all people who are highly creative struggle in their home, but people who struggle in their home are generally very creative people. Um,
I'm laughing
so I
because I
tell him,
identify with that. I'm sitting in a mess constantly, and it's one of those things where I've just kind of accepted it. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but
well,
I've
no,
kind of
well,
accepted it. Just like, you
here's the
know what? I'm
thing.
doing what I can, and I'm still
People,
creative. I'm writing books, and it's
exactly. Well, and here's the
working
thing
for
is,
me.
the thing that God showed me was, I made your brain the way it is on purpose, right? Like
Right.
it's the way it's supposed to be, right? And the fact that you are highly creative is directly related to the fact that you are, I'm talking about me here, God saying to you,
That's fair.
is the fact that, you struggle with physical stuff and
Hmm.
keeping it under control and stuff, and a lot, and the reason traditional organizing advice did not work for me was because it's generally written by organized people
Yeah,
and their
it's
brains work
true.
very differently from the way my brain works, right?
Yeah.
And so I was always like, okay, you're showing a before picture that is my dream after picture. Like I was like,
Yeah,
we were not
it's
speaking the
true.
same language, and so they were skipping all this stuff that was like, well, isn't that obvious? And I'm like, not to me. I didn't get, so
Hmm.
that's where I come in. I teach that stuff, that
Hmm.
people don't understand. So as I was, um, what were we talking about? I think I've done this in almost every interview. I get off and I'm just like, wait,
We're
what was the
we're
question?
talking about your brain works the way it does, and it's okay. A little mess is okay.
Oh, I know what it is.
Connected to
So a lot
creativity.
of, yeah, a lot of people who talk about this stuff, if they're talking about it because it is natural to them, they do enjoy it, it's something that's fun to them, will make statements like, well, you
Mm,
can't focus in a messy
hmm.
space. It keeps you from being productive. And I was always like, except that I can,
Hmm.
and that's actually the problem.
Yep.
Right? Like the people who can't function in a messy space are the ones who are constantly aware that it's getting messy and keeping it from getting messy. I can focus great in a
Hmm.
messy space. Like
Absolutely.
I can sit there with my computer and there can be junk all around me and I'm just like I'm fine.
Yep.
And so to make that blanket statement is part of what's so confusing to the person like me who's like, okay, but I am being productive and I am getting the things done. And I am, I read this book one time where somebody was like giving financial advice and they were like, well, you got to get your house decluttered first before. And I was like, really? Because I was like, no, I'm actually an amazing budgeter. Like I'm amazing at it,
Same, actually.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, but at the same time, my house was a disaster. So I was just like, no, that's not. But for some people, yes, that is the case. My issue is that I can zero in on a task and not notice that it's getting completely and totally out of control until all of a sudden I look up and go, and at that point, it's so overwhelming that I shut down and don't know what to do. Right. So that's where I've had to come in and figure all that out.
Yep.
So I don't see
Yep.
incremental mess, right? So it's that the different people and we're all created differently and we're supposed to be because the world needs people you know, who don't make big huge time commitments because they're like, well, I need to keep my house under control. Then there's me and I'm like, you need somebody to organize a Christmas production for 350 people and I'm like, yeah, I'll do
Do
that.
it.
Like, and it never crosses my mind that I also have to keep laundry done and all that kind of stuff in the midst of that I'm just you know like right now I'm in the midst of book launch and then I have another book due in May and uh, I'm like, I just told my husband the other day, I was like, can you cook for the next 4 months? And he was like, sure. Thankfully he can. But I'm
Hmm.
like, I see it. I see things are getting more out of control because I'm so zeroed in on, what I'm working on right
Hmm.
now. So,
It's funny because my wife is actually the more organized person. She can't,
mhm.
she'll constantly ask me, how did you not notice that X was lying there for 2 days? I don't know. I just didn't notice it. I will step over it. And it's not because I don't
Yep.
care. It's just one of those things where it doesn't bother me. But,
We are very coordinated. That's what my
yeah.
friend would always say. She goes, I just figure you're more coordinated than me because I would trip. So I have to pick it up. And I'm like, yeah, I have this video and I made my husband watch it when I first realized what had happened. So, my first video I ever made on YouTube, I was cleaning out a kitchen drawer, and I was working in the drawer, and something went into the cabinet above it, and so I opened up the cabinet door, and I kept working, and because of the where the camera was and stuff, it was the first one I'd ever done, and so I had to go around that cabinet door. But the cabinet door is like this. I think it was 11 times, it might have been more, that I went like this around the cabinet door like this and you could see that it was not conscious. It was just me moving around it. And then at some random point, I shut it. But I was like, because my husband it drives him bananas. He feels like he lives in
Same. My,
Sixth
my
Sense, the
wife
movie.
is the same
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Because I constantly leave cabinet doors open. And so I was like, look, I said, look, I literally have proof that I have no awareness
Hmm.
that that thing is, and I'm able to just move around it and it never registers that it's making life
Yep.
harder. I'm just doing it, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's partially for me. It's partially ADHD as well because
Oh, yeah.
that doesn't help with me. But I've just come to accept it. So I just want to take a few minutes to connect this to some readers because I think the same thing happens with authors who are tried to people try to prescribe them to the right way to write a book, right? The organized way to write a book. And that has never worked for me. Every time I read this, I'm like, this just doesn't make sense, right? This isn't the way my brain works. And the moment I pushed that away and just like, yeah, that doesn't work for me, I was actually able to write and do the things that I need to do because it was the same thing. It's like God made your brain work that way, and that's okay. Does it mean that you have some weaknesses? Yes. But does it also mean you have some strengths? Absolutely. And so you just leverage those and you can make progress. So
For
but
sure.
honestly, we could probably go on forever and talk about all these things, but we are running short on time. So before we end here, I'd just love to ask, where can people find more information about you and your books and your podcasts and all the fun things?
Yeah. If you search Dana K. White online, wherever books are sold, YouTube, podcasts, all that, just make sure you put the K in there because there is somebody else named Dana White, but I have
You don't
hair.
want her. You want
It's a
Dana
guy.
K. White. Oh, it is. Okay. You don't
It's
want
the
him.
guy. See, a lot of men know, but it's the guy who started the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He's
Oh,
Dana White.
okay. Okay.
So
I had heard of that.
danawhite.com redirects to the UFC. So in some ways it's been nice because this was a secret thing. Like people will kind of just hear that I do something online and they'll search Dana White, not thinking, not
It's
knowing the
like,
K.
huh.
And they're like, I never found her. And I'm like, but if you search Dana K White, you'll find me everywhere.
It was a ploy and it worked.
Yeah, it did.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dana. I appreciate the time.
Thanks.
I hope you found that helpful and, encouraging because Dana is a very driven person. She's very funny. I really appreciated her being her kind of brass tacks approach to this is a business. And while I want to reach people and be there for them and, create this type of community, I made it very clear from the beginning that I'm unabashedly monetizing this. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. A business is a business. And I appreciate her approach to that as well as just her sentiment towards everything, being authentic, being funny, right? It's a lot easier to connect with people when you are that way. So I want to strive to be more like that because I believe sometimes behind a camera or behind social media, we tend to not be ourselves, and I'm totally guilty of that because you want to, be a specific type of person or have this specific image, whatever that is. And sometimes breaking down the walls is what's most important. So yeah, I hope you learned about that as much as I did from that. So next week is episode 150. Looking forward to that. If you'd like to join me for the podcast, head to thecasualauthor.com, fill out the pitch form there. It's super easy, takes just a few minutes. Would love to hear from you. I'm sure we can find a time. And then, yeah, also, if you have questions, send them to Dan at thecasualauthor.com or comment on the YouTube channel. I do need to figure out the commenting on the actual show notes. I think you might be able to do so if you're listening on Spotify. I don't know about other channels, so I'll look into that. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you, and I hope you have a great week. Looking forward to seeing you next week.